The blast dust was still settling when they carried her into the forward clinic, a woman bleeding from the shoulder, clothes torn, breathing steady like someone who had trained their whole life not to panic. The SEALs who brought her and whispered that she was a civilian tech caught near an ambush, nothing more. But the moment the medic cut through the shredded fabric of her vest, the room changed. Her eyes stayed calm, too calm, scanning corners, judging distances, mapping exits with a veteran's instinct. And then the medic saw a glimpse of something beneath her ribs, something inked into her skin that no civilian should ever carry. Every SEAL in the room froze as if someone had pulled the air out of the building, because that symbol belonged to a unit spoken about only in rumors, a unit that didn't officially exist, a unit whose survivors were almost never found alive. In that silent second, every man understood that the injured woman sitting quietly on the table was far more dangerous and far more haunted than any of them had assumed. Before the medic ever touched a bandage, he could sense there was something off about her. She had arrived on base 2 weeks earlier, introduced as a logistics specialist assigned temporarily to a supply convoy route. She kept to herself, ate alone, barely spoke. When she walked, it was with a precise weight distribution of someone trained to vanish into crowds. She flinched at nothing, slamming doors, distant explosions, raised voices. None of it broke her expression. The SEALs joked that she must have nerves of steel. The medic noticed the way her hands were scarred, the way she always sat facing an exit, the way her eyes scanned people before she spoke. She never volunteered information, but she absorbed everything: schedules, supply routes, guard rotations, with the quiet focus of someone who had learned to survive by noticing what others ignored. The medic had seen that look before, years ago, on operators who'd spent too long behind enemy lines. Now, seeing it on her, everything finally clicked into place. When the firefight erupted that morning, she was already moving before the alarms finished sounding, ducking low, weaving through debris with the muscle memory of someone who had lived in ambush zones. Witnesses said she didn't scream or freeze, she simply reacted. And that reaction was what saved half the convoy. She had tackled one of the youngest SEALs out of the blast radius just seconds before the secondary explosion ripped through the road. Her shoulder took the shrapnel meant for him. Even wounded, she shoved him behind a burned-out vehicle and returned fire with the calm precision of a professional. The SEALs who saw it couldn't reconcile it with the quiet woman they thought they knew. They had mistaken silence for softness, stillness for weakness. But on that dirt road, under a burning sky, she fought like someone who had tried to retire from violence but was forced back into it. When the medic found her, she was half-conscious, leaning against a shattered Humvee, blood soaking her shirt. Yet her weapon was still braced in her good hand, fingers steady, eyes tracking shadows even as her strength faded. It was only when she recognized the SEALs that her grip finally loosened. Back inside the clinic, the air felt thick as the medic lifted the shredded fabric from her ribs. The symbol hidden beneath the Black Ops phoenix and dagger was not just a tattoo, but a signature. It belonged to an off-book strike unit that was rumored to take on missions labeled impossible, missions where no backup ever came. The SEALs exchanged uneasy glances because they all knew what that emblem meant. Anyone who carried it had seen hell and been sent back to keep fighting. Most never talked about their past because their past was classified under layers the average soldier would never even hear whispers about. She watched them without speaking, her expression unreadable, as if waiting for a judgment she already knew too well. She didn't ask them to keep her secret, she assumed they wouldn't, but the way the SEALs stood there, silent and respectful, told her she was wrong. Instead of interrogation, they offered bandages, water, and space. Instead of suspicion, they offered the quiet understanding reserved for warriors who recognized one of their own. And for the first time since she arrived on that base, she looked, if only for a moment, like someone who wasn't carrying the world alone. She sat upright despite the pain, her posture too controlled for someone losing blood, as if discipline alone held her together. The medic tried to ease her back, but she resisted with the reflexive tension of someone who had learned never to be vulnerable around strangers. Only when she saw the SEAL chief nod calmly did she finally let her shoulders drop. The medic worked in silence, knowing instinctively that questions would only push her farther behind her walls. Every time he brushed near the emblem on her ribs, she tensed not out of shame, but out of memory. The kind of memory that hurts in ways scars never show. Outside the clinic, the SEAL team whispered among themselves, replaying everything they'd seen that morning. She had moved through the chaos like someone who had already accepted death once and walked away from it. None of them could forget the look in her eyes, the look of a survivor who fought only because she no longer knew how to stop. Rumors spread quickly, faster than orders or reports. Some men wondered how a woman with her past ended up hidden in logistics. Others wondered what kind of mission could break an operator from a unit that didn't officially exist. But the truth sat quietly inside her like an unspoken weight. She hadn't been sent here, she had disappeared here. This base was not an assignment. It was a refuge she hoped no one from her old world would ever find. The medic finally finished stitching her shoulder, stepping back with a professionalism that masked the questions in his mind. He could tell she was calculating again how long the injury would slow her, how many exits the clinic had, how much attention she had just drawn. It was the mental checklist of someone who had lived most of their life hunted. One of the younger SEALs stepped forward, guilt flickering in his expression. She had taken shrapnel for him, saved him without hesitation, and he didn't even know her name beyond the alias on her badge. But instead of gratitude, she simply nodded once, the smallest acknowledgement that saving him was instinct, not choice. The medic's voice softened when he finally asked, "That tattoo. Are they looking for you?" Her eyes shifted just slightly, a crack in her mask. "They always are," she whispered, as if the truth tasted like ash. The room fell still, every man understanding the danger wrapped inside those 3 words. People from units like hers didn't retire, they vanished, or they were erased. Her being here meant she was trying to outrun something bigger than any of them realized. The SEAL chief straightened, studying her with a quiet respect that replaced every assumption he'd made about her. "You saved one of my men," he said, voice low but steady. "That makes you one of us now." Something softened in her then, not trust, not comfort, but recognition. Recognition that these men understood the language of scars, silence, and survival. Recognition that she was no longer being seen as a ghost from a black file, but as a warrior who chose to protect them even when she didn't have to. She exhaled slowly, as if letting down a guard she never meant to lower. Her shoulders eased, her eyes losing their edge for the first time since she arrived on the base. And in that fragile second, the medic realized she wasn't hiding from who she had been, she was hiding from who she had been forced to become. When she finally stood to leave, the morning light caught her face just right, revealing the exhaustion, the strength, and the history she carried like a second skin. She didn't limp, she didn't falter. She walked with the quiet, deadly grace of someone who had survived battles no one would ever know about. The SEALs watched her go, not with suspicion now, but with respect, deep, wordless, unshakable respect. Injured but quiet, she disappeared into the waking camp like a shadow returning to its rightful place. And though none of them said it aloud, every SEAL who saw that emblem inked beneath her ribs knew one truth: she wasn't just someone with a combat past. She was someone who had been shaped by the kind of war legends are afraid to tell. The wind shifted through the camp, carrying dust across the empty roads and quiet tents. The medic remained seated for a long moment, reflecting on what he had seen, the weight of her presence lingering in the air. Her silhouette vanished into the dawn, leaving behind a story that would echo silently through the minds of every operator who had witnessed it. No one spoke, no one questioned, everyone understood. Her past, her survival, her scars, they all mattered, but not here. She had chosen to fight only when necessary, to protect only when required, and to exist quietly when the world had already demanded too much. The emblem under her ribs remained hidden, a secret signature of the life she once led, the missions she endured, and the soldier she could never fully leave behind. And as the camp came to life under the first golden light, the SEALs knew they had witnessed something extraordinary, a quiet warrior, injured yet unbroken, moving through the world as a force none would dare underestimate.